Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Karoti vachalam pangoram gayate girim yatkripatamaham bande Shri Guru Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram Namam Vishnupadaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Jayapataka Swami Niti Namine Namacharya Padaya Nitai Kripa Pradayane Gaurakata Damadaya Nagara Grama Tarini Namam Vishnupadaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadhi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Shri Shri Panchatattva ki jai, Nitai Gaura ki jai. Deepa, can you say Gauranga?
Gauranga!
Gauranga Nityananda, Gauranga Nityananda. Right. So we are all.
Is that all you've been doing last couple of days?
Yes. literally, basically trying to become the man of Nityananda's man. By becoming Nityananda's man, Nityananda takes our side and then we can become Gauranga's man. And if we become Gauranga's man, then we become Radha and Krishna's. So yeah, that's basically what I've been working on. All right, ladies, thank you so much for being here in time. So we are studying Bhagavad Gita today, and I will be reading a very special article by one of my teachers. Hare Krishna Kushbu, welcome back. We missed you. Hare Krishna Tri Sandhya, Hare Krishna Sananda, and welcome Deepa. All right. Today, we will be examining our life situations, the people in our life, and what kind of influence those people have in our life, what we can learn about the real causes of war of Mahabharata. So we all know that the Pandavas had difficult cousins, okay? Sometimes we have difficult parents, so they had very difficult cousins. So we all have family members. Yeah. We all have family members, and many of us may have family members that are really difficult. So today's meditation is focused on the concept of trying to learn the internal reasons of war in our life. What is bringing us to trigger points? What is actually causing us stress in our life? Because it's not others. Just a secret note there. All right. So I'm going to share this reading quickly. Let me see. Is this open? Yes. Okay. So I want you to see this iceberg very carefully. Look at this iceberg. What does it say? It says the issue. First it says cause of Kurukshetra war. So what was the cause of Kurukshetra war? The issue was territorial dispute. Duh, it's like, come on guys, that's the reason. Don't you know about it? So husband and wife fighting. What's the problem? Well, the husband is the problem, obviously, or the wife is the problem. Because of the wife, I am in problem. What's your problem, child? My parents are the problem. What's your problem, parents? My children are my problem. So yeah, that's territorial dispute. My parents don't listen to me. My parents don't understand me. Or my children don't listen to me. They don't follow me. Or my husband is not understanding of me, etc. We know, goes on and on. So there is territorial dispute. Territorial. All right. People with issues is actually the underlying issues. Underneath that iceberg of what may appear as a conflict in our life, there is some issues. What is it? People with issues. That's the issue. We've got our issues. People in our life, they've got their issues. So when a person with an issue, another person with the issue come together, it's a huge issue-based problem. In other words, Dhritarashtra's attachment to obstinate Duryodhana. This was the issue in case of the whole Mahabharata war. So I'm going to quickly read this article and jump into the significance of this in our lives. Whenever fighting breaks out between two sides, we may naturally ask, what is the cause? While a particular issue may be stated as the cause, it may well just be the tip of the iceberg. Just as a huge part of the iceberg lies invisible below the water, the bigger cause of the fighting may be unstated and unapparent. And frequently, that cause is people with issues. So that's going to be our discussion today. So let's highlight that and keep it while we get back to it. This reality is indicated in the Bhagavad Gita's first verse, which was spoken just before the catastrophic fratricidal war at Kurukshetra. In this verse, the blind king Dhritarashtra refers to one side as his side and the other side as the side of Pandavas. Given that one side was led by his sons, such a reference might seem innocuous. However, it was insidious because Dhritarashtra was meant to be father figure for both sides. I just need to make Deepa co-host so you can let people in, because I may get lost in reading and I may not let people in. So Deepa, if you can just let people in. I'm going to make Sananda also co-host, so either of you can let people in. Okay. The other side was led by his nephews, who had lost their father in their childhood and who had thereafter come under his care. Though they respected him like a surrogate father, he treated them as worse than stepsons. When his wicked Duryodhana claimed sole inheritance of the kingdom and tried repeatedly to assassinate the Pandavas, whom he saw as rival claimants, Dhritarashtra covertly assented and sometimes even overtly approved. That's another highlight. If somebody could, whoever, Sananda or Trisandhya, either of you, if you could just type these two things, people with issues, number one, in the chat box, because if I try to do that, then my sharing will be disturbed. It's the share screen. So you could just put number one is people with issues. Number two is, what's that? What was the other one? Covertly assented and sometimes even overtly approved. That's the second point. If you could just kind of type that out in the top, number two, that would be the topic today. Covertly assented and overtly approved.
I can't find it.
You can't find it? Okay, I'll do the second one. If you can just do the first one.
Yeah. Sorry, I have it.
When I try to do it, something happens to my screen. I'm unable to go there and put I'm unable to copy it. Anyway, I hope I can. I think we will remember it. If you can remember, it's fine as well. The issue at hand, a territorial dispute over the kingdom, was resolvable, given that the Pandavas were astonishingly accommodating. They had never claimed more than half of the kingdom, and they had expressed readiness to settle for something far less, just 5 villages. But the Pandavas' conciliatory overtures bore no fruit, because Dhritarashtra was blindly attached to Duryodhana, who was incorrigibly impudent and irrationally intransigent. While a father's attachment to his son is understandable, Dhritarashtra had let his attachment grow like a cancer that destroyed his sense of duty, fairness, rationality, and even basic survival instinct. That's going to be our third point. Something that destroys, like from there, like a cancer that destroyed his sense of duty, fairness, rationality, and even basic survival instinct. That's going to be our third point of discussion. Being paralyzed by attachment, he let an intra-family conflict snowball into a war. Oof. All right, one sentence summary of this is, fights are caused not so much by issues as by people with issues. So let's think over these three questions. What is the actual cause of fights? How does the Gita's first verse reveal Dhritarashtra's mentality? And what caused the Kurukshetra war? So something for us to meditate. The 1.1 verse said, O Sanjaya, after my sons and the sons of Pandu assembled in the place of pilgrimage at Kurukshetra, desiring to fight, what did they do? You know, there's a rap. My brother's sons and my sons took their battle-thirsty moods. No, he's asking Dhritarashtra is asking Sanjaya, what's the news? My brother's sons and my sons. They took he recognizes that my sons are there because of battle-thirsty mood, but he's still differentiating my side of the story, my comfort, me and my inconvenience. So Dhritarashtra is all about the self-centered attachment style. All right. So we have, let me see if I can access the text chat now. Yes, I can. Thank you very much. Thank you.
This means he was just as dangerous as Duryodhan. And yet
even
we
more,
just see Duryodhan. Yeah, exactly. Yet we see Duryodhan
because
more.
If only he was strong, if only he was not codependent on Duryodhan, he would not let all these atrocities happen, because he, as it says in the second point we're going to discuss, covertly assented and sometimes overtly approved. He let Duryodhan do all sorts of atrocities. He let him be such a criminal. So yeah, in the Bhagavad Gita introduction, Srila Prabhupada speaks about how Dhritarashtra, even in the first verse, Prabhupada speaks about how Dhritarashtra was not just blind physically, he was spiritually blind. He just couldn't see the point. And if you actually see Mahabharata itself, there were many signs that Duryodhana was such evil and very inauspicious for the whole dynasty. And if only he had gotten rid of him in the beginning, but no, the attachment began. And then that's what happens when we are infatuated by some idea of anything. We can keep going deeper and deeper and deeper. That's why they call it falling in love. Like they keep falling and falling, even though you see the negative things of people. No, but I'm already, and so we keep going down, and get lost with it. Okay, so 3 points. You can jump in and contribute, comment, share, ask questions at any point, but I'm going to divide this, at least what I want to share, into 3 parts. And after each part, you're free to ask questions or comment upon it. So the first issue is about people with issues. So the relevance of people with issues in our life, as I was saying in the beginning, we all have to deal with people. We cannot just go away into the Himalayas and sit in the cave and say, I don't want to deal with people. We all have to deal with people. And people come with issues. We all have our programming. Right now I'm studying about PTSD, post-traumatic consequences, how that affects our psychology. I'm studying about adult child from dysfunctional families. I'm studying all these things, which is very relevant to this topic of people with issues. when we are, say, raised in a family which has some level of dysfunctionality, is in every family in Kali Yuga. There's always some conflict. There's always, maybe the husband and wife are fighting, maybe the brothers are fighting, maybe the in-laws are fighting. Even in my own personal home, I saw conflict with my grandparents and parents. There was always some kind of conflict there. So there is, as children, we grow up witnessing conflicts, and conflicts, what appears on the external, right? What externally appears, like, oh, my mom doesn't like my grandma, right? As kids, that's what we may just take it. But actually, as I grew up, I actually noticed that my mom had her own set of issues. She came from dysfunctional family. She came from traumatic situations. And then she was triggered by the presence of the mother-in-law. And there were so many internal issues, basically people with issues. There was so much more to the conflict than what it appeared like. And usually the mistakes that we make are, number one, we think that the other person is the problem, right? We think usually this person is obstacle to my peace. We look at our, like me personally, like I would look at my mom, and I grew up thinking she is the problem in our family. That's how I started to, like, the kind of projection. And then, yeah, then I started behaving. She would not behave nicely with my grandma. I would see that, and I would literally do the same thing she did to my grandma, to her. My mom was rude with my grandma, and I loved my grandma and my grandfather. I couldn't tolerate her being rude. What did I do? I did exactly the same thing that I hated what my mom was doing. I did the exact same thing to my mother. And so there was a lot of conflict between me and my mother. I grew up in a very chaotic, very strange situation, because I would always choose my grandparents over my mother, and she would feel jealous, and then her reactions would make me hate her even more, because I would be like, why is she behaving like this? Because I never understood that she has her own insecurities, etc. So this brings up that's the first issue, that we blame other people. Second, we do not look at a mirror. We don't look at our faults. Like I said, in my case, I did exactly the same thing my mom was doing. She was rude to my grandparents. I was rude to her. And then the third thing is to not focus on the result, but to focus on contributing, not putting putting ghee into fire. So there is a conflict. Either I can choose to put more fire, because I'm frustrated, I'm irritated. I can put more fire and make it worse, or I can try to put it off, right? Sometimes as kids, when we try to put off the fire, that also we develop some dysfunctional relational patterns and attachment styles, etc. So what needs to be done? Well, when we have grown up, we need to reparent ourselves. So when we understand people are with issues, I did a lot of work on this. I went to meetings, I took up ACA work, I took up 12-step work, started to take responsibility for my actions. I started to, like now, my mom is not controlling me, but I could still give her my power. There's still my patterns that come up. So we can work on accepting people because they have issues. So we do not see only issues, we actually see what is beneath the surface. We don't see only the tip of the iceberg, but we become willing to see, oh, I am behaving, sometimes we want somebody to understand our situation. Let's say I react in a very angry way with my husband. And then I want my husband to understand that, come on, I came from a dysfunctional family and I would like you to understand what I went through, be tolerant of me, understand me. But then if you really want me to understand you, you also need to be willing to understand your whoever, your parents or your spouse, that they also come from a background dealing with people with issues, their parents, their school. I have a friend who went to military and was traumatized by the experience. So that person has triggers around discipline, around things like that. So we all have that situation. We need to have self-compassion. But one of the things we need to remember is what result do we want when we are working in a situation where there are people with issues. And these are the 3 points that we make a mistake. But the overall, the top, the cherry on top of this whole messy cake is karma. Why do you have that specific parents? Why did you go through that specific experience? Because the karma is what the problem is not the planets. The problem is not the parents. The problem is not relationships. The problem is our mind. Our mind is the cause. According to Srimad Bhagavatam, mind is the cause that brings us to all this situation. And our mind is the only thing that can help us to get out of that situation. It's not others. It's not planets. So karma basically means mind, if you want in one word. So we need to somehow or another turn that mind into a friend, make it sit down and say, don't react like the other person who's reacting. Bhakti Tirtha Swami used to say he learned from his father how to not behave. So sometimes when we look at people, we don't like their behavior, we don't lose it and act like them, but rather we want to change ourselves. All right, that was section 1 of the discussion today. People with issues. Anybody in this room who has people with issues? I don't think so. You all seem you all seem together and you all seem like in harmony. Yeah, you have something to say, Trisandhya?
Haribol, I would have a lot to say, but I wouldn't know where to begin. Yeah, I relate to the learned behavior. Of course, we pick up on the behavior that we learn in our families. I know that I'm just realizing now, sadly, that, I mean, it's not too late, hopefully, but I'm realizing now that I repeated so much of how my mom treated my father and me with my husband, and that was really blaming and criticizing and judging, and and just really saying, you're not okay the way you are, and yeah, I really appreciate what you say about blaming, because I spent a lot of my life doing that, just blaming circumstances, blaming other people, blaming the world, blaming my husband, my children, not really my children, but blaming just anyone. My children are kind of the exception. I put them on a pedestal, but blaming anyone else that I could for my own unhappiness. But until I started realizing that this is ridiculous. Now, I think one of my kids said to me, "You're just the perfect one. We're all a mess, and you're the perfect one." And it just hit me that that I was making a fool out of myself. So, yeah, you said some. Yeah, you said some beautiful things. Thank you. Thank you for
Yeah, what you said brought up 2 more points that I wanted to add to the topic. We could live rest of our life, all adult life, blaming situation, blaming the school, blaming our parents, blaming our grandparents, blaming our neighbors, anything, anybody you find, blaming the dog next door. He was barking all night, so I couldn't study, and therefore I couldn't get through. We can come up with all sorts of strategies to blame somebody else. We could live all life like that, and I know adults who've lived most of their life like that, and somehow or another because Krishna gives them that strength, so they always find very creative ways to blame somebody and deny their responsibility, or to change it. Start living a life where you start taking responsibility and look at that karmic side. Look at the side that people don't behave like that because they want to torture somebody. People who hurt us are the most hurt. People wound others because they're very wounded. This is the explanation in this world. And if only we can understand that psychologically, philosophically, then we will become willing to live in the solution. So what were the 2 points I wanted to say after you shared? Sunday, you brought up this, that either we can live in the problem all our life, find all sorts of creative ways to blame somebody, live in the problem, or start living in the solution. Find that, like you were saying in Krishna Connection on Sunday, that beautiful point, if 95% of your life is messed up, focus on that 5%. Right? So if the half glass is empty, then focus on the glass that's, drink up what's there. No, don't focus on what's not there. Yeah, thank you. All right, so I'm going to go to the next topic. You're always welcome to type questions or jump in and say, shut up, Shri Radha Govinda, I have something to say. You got issues here. All right. The second one is covertly assented and sometimes even overtly approved. Yeah, Dhritarashtra, he quietly, sometimes, for example, in Mahabharata, there is this episode where Duryodhan, he tortures some fishermen who actually are just trying to do their duty, but he just goes there, bosses around, overconfident, egoistic prince who just wants to lord it over the nature, lord it over people. And Dhritarashtra becomes extremely disturbed for something that didn't even happen. Shakuni, who is the uncle who was always so manipulative, he apparently makes it look like Duryodhan is a little bit hurt, and Dhritarashtra completely loses it. And there's this whole episode of how Dhritarashtra punishes those innocent people. And Duryodhana is not just forgiven, he is glorified and he's overprotected. And another very, very big episode is like such a remarkable, unforgettable pastime is when Duryodhan poisons Bhima. He takes his brother, right? His own brother, cousin brother, takes him, poisons his sweet rice and feeds Bhima shamelessly, ruthlessly. And Bhima drinks it up. Bhima takes it in. And then he's thrown into this deep waters. And Bhima goes down, 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 down. Duryodhana is like, my task is done. What a ruthless rascal. So he was like demoniac, So that's what he did with Bhima. And then they figure out, after weeks of crying and mourning and grief and feeding all the brahmanas to honor the dead soul of Bhima, Bhima suddenly appears. Bhima, who can kill Bhima? Bhimasena just comes out, not comes out from the dead. He never was dead. When he went under the waters, Vasuki, because he had the DNA of the devatas, the demigods of serpent gods. So the serpent god came and saved Bhima, took the body of Bhima, and then they gave an antidote to that poison, which actually even aggravated and activated his strength 1,000 times more. And he just came out like impossible to be defeated. Basically, no poison can ever poison him because it just became a strength to him. And then he lived there, he stayed there, he took nectar, and he just became as powerful as 1,000,000 elephants. So that's what happened with that episode. And then he comes back and they figure out that Duryodhana actually attempted to kill Bhima. What was his punishment? Nothing. Nothing. Dhritarashtra did nothing. He was so scared to even think of punishing Duryodhana. And in the Mahabharata episodes, we can actually see such dramatic, I love those episodes. They're really done fantastically to invoke those emotions of confusion and grief and fear and possessiveness and insanity in one word. Mm-hmm. Sanity of Dhritarashtra. What? Obsession with the sun, attachment, blind attachment to something. Yeah, that's the third point. But here he, he was not willing to punish. And Bhishma wanted Duryodhana to be punished so he can walk on the right path. But Dhritarashtra had no courage. So sometimes in our own lives, we look at our tendencies, our patterns, and we see that I'm not on track. And what do? We keep quiet. I keep going on that track. I keep following the same patterns that are detrimental for my spiritual health, for other people around me. Why? I'm lazy. I don't have the courage to change myself. I know I'm thinking of myself, like I didn't have the courage to be different than my mother. As much as I hated her behavior, subconsciously I was doing exactly the same thing. And when I started my recovery work, and I just looked at myself and like, oh my God, I have no right to be upset with her because I'm doing worse than her. So
Rather Govinda, generally people do that, don't they? Unless really a lot of work goes into it, and then
yeah, that's why Bhagavad Gita is there. Take a moment, take that mirror. Let's look at ourselves. What is it in my mother that I dislike? And what am I repeating of the same? So we can, again, are we assenting? Are we kind of going along with our bad habits, the bad patterns, the DNA? We call it the generational curse or generational dysfunctionality. We keep on carrying that, and then we pass it on to our next generation as well. So do we want to do that? Or do we want to change? It's up to us. So yes, it's not easy to find people who want to work on their inner life and create healthy, recovered humans. They may not be working on that. And then overtly approved, I want to bring up this episode where Duryodhana, he said, I'm going to die. I'm going to commit suicide if you don't crown me as the king. I'm going to commit suicide. And so Dhritarashtra was like, he gave in. So sometimes it's like that. And even in our lives, our mind is Dhritarashtra. Our mind is that Dhritarashtra, attached to, finding happiness in all the wrong places. Running after image, running after comfort, running after pleasures, running after selfish pursuits, essentially. So that's the Dhritarashtra mind, the Duryodhana mind also. Duryodhana mind, Dhritarashtra mind. And okay, this is a very important point. See, we all have that inner child. Inside me, there's little Shri, little Deepa, little Sandhya, little Sananda, little Khushbu. We all have that little, still immature, still figuring it out, still triggered by certain things, still jealous about something silly, whatever. There are different flavors of the inner child. Sometimes we get stuck when we are 5 years old. Something happened, some growth was stunted, and there's still that 5-year-old trying to get attention, trying to run after something superficial. So how do I tolerate that? Self-compassion, self-dialogue, sometimes self-apology. I sat my little child, inner child, yesterday or 2 days ago. I sat her down and I had to explain to her the number of Instagram followers does not determine your self-worth, because I'm losing some followers. So there was that inner child within me freaking out, completely freaking out, running crazy and whatnot. And something else happened. Some other person, some success, something came out, and that inner child was freaking out. I had to literally apologize to her. I am sorry that I abandoned you. I let you go there. I let you, I pressured you into being the best or performing the best or controlling whatnot. I never let her be. I always pushed her into grow up quickly, be the adult, show your success. So, imagine your inner child like a child of your own. How would you treat that child? So we need to learn to treat that little child within us similar way. So we all have that little Duryodhana inside us that says, poison that Bhima, right? Or, in our own different strategies of what means poisoning. And usually it's in certain human societies, it's about criticize others, right? Poison, speak something bad about somebody, make yourself feel better than the other person. That's poisoning. And so on. So we need to be very careful about letting ourselves taken. I can't find words, but we shouldn't let ourselves go away with we shouldn't let our mind get away with this mentality of either tolerating the wrong, either tolerating some attachment that is not good for us and not doing anything about it, or about consciously going after something we know is not healthy. All right, that's the second section. Any questions, comments? Any
just a comment, really.
Any covert comments or overt questions?
It's about creating boundaries for yourself, isn't it? Being aware and then creating boundaries.
I don't think I ever let my inner child speak, because I always wanted to people see me like I'm strong, I'm good, and I don't have any issues, and I'm fine totally, and I can help you. I don't need help. I just show up myself like that, because I don't like to be seen like a person who's weak, or she has her vulnerabilities. So I feel like I might think that they will use all my vulnerabilities against me for doing something or the other. So I never shared anything that is personal, that is, I feel that it's in my heart, that's belong to my inner child. Thing like that. I'm straightforward with the things that relate to my mind, but not with the things that relate to my heart. So I always end up doing messy things. I always try to keep a relation with someone in a way that I know they might hurt in the end. But I just think about the moment. I don't think about the entire relation I have with that person. I don't think about how hurtful it is for them. I just think that maybe if I don't do this, they'll stay a little bit more longer. I just don't think about forever, and I think that is my mentality, that is my weakness of thinking about someone in a way that I need this relationship forever. If I need this relationship forever, I should do things that take me so much. If I'm not investing my issues, if I'm not telling about myself, if I'm not expressing myself, I don't think that relation lasts forever. But even though how much I try to, I always end up like, okay, if I tell this, maybe this affects a person. So let's not do this right now. This is not the time. So I always procrastinate things, and at the end they affect me, but still I try to patch up. I always don't let my inner child speak. Go tell the person. But I'm like, shut up, you're matured, you can't do that. So it's always like I block my way for myself. I block my growth. I block everything. Yeah, that's it for the.
Yeah, thank you. That's called also coping mechanism. So because of certain dysfunctionality, we develop a certain coping mechanism. Sometimes we may develop aggression to keep others away from us. We may develop aggression. In some other cases, we withdraw and we don't say the truth, and we hide and we learn to lie. That's another coping mechanism, and that helped us survive But the question is, when we're becoming adults, the question is like, do we want to continue with that, or do we want to change? So this is a question that it really is very helpful. Another thing you brought up in the beginning was, the self-abandonment. We usually abandon the little child inside us, and then we keep blaming all our life that other people are not taking care of that inner child. Other people are not understanding. But then we ourselves abandon that inner child.
Yeah,
Don't
I
listen.
exactly do that. I exactly think.
We all do that. We all,
Yeah.
to some degree or another, we abandon that child who is asking for the ice cream, or asking for attention, or asking for some acceptance.
Yeah.
And then we keep blaming everybody else around, saying, oh, you never accepted. But we have been neglecting that child. And once in a while, you know what happens with a teenager? You say, no, 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 no. One day the kid goes crazy. So that's what happens with our inner child. We keep suppressing, neglecting, and doing that. And one day, it just kind of, you cannot control that kid anymore, because it asked your attention, it asked your attention, it asked your attention. And then we cannot control that anymore. So
yeah,
that's
98% of my life, I don't think I took care of my inner child, or I took care of anything that's related to me.
You can start today.
Yeah, today's the day, I think.
Yeah, so don't abandon your inner child. You know, like it's like your brother. I mean, Sananda, you would never abandon your brother. You know, if he's crying, he's hurt, he's wounded, he's bleeding,
Yeah.
you're never going to abandon him and run away.
Yeah.
So you're wounded, you're bleeding, and then what you're doing, you're abandoning and jumping with friends and distracting yourself from that wound. That's not going to help.
Yeah.
Don't abandon that inner child. It's like, okay, your inner child.
I think we abandon when it becomes painful, but really you have to, somewhere in there, you have to deal with the pain, and you have to stay with the inner child.
Yeah, I mean, she's lucky because she's still young. Some of us, we started later in life, all this awareness, we started later, and it took us some time. So when you're young, when you start, in a few years, it's going to be better. Otherwise, you continue that victim mentality, that mentality of blaming others and shaming yourself and hiding that, and then all the other things like compensating that with overconfidence, compensating that with whatever,
Yeah, just trying to act strong, just things
it's
like
called
that.
compensating. Yeah, compensating with showing overconfidence or strength.
Also, you think you won't be able to cope if you do it any differently, and over time you realize
those coping mechanisms kind of helped us. These are called survival mechanisms. Those did help us survive, but they are not healthy to have relationships with healthy people. It may work with unhealthy people for a while, like Samantha was saying, but if you want with healthy people, then you have to develop healthy habits. Like if you hide and you're inauthentic and you're not being true to yourself, then we cannot have relationships that we deserve or whatever. All right, let's go to the third. Thank you very much for your contributions. It's really enlivening. The discussion is very enlivening, and Khushbu is also saying that she's loving this session, and so am I. So thank you. All right, the third part of this thing that I'm thinking of is like a cancer that destroyed his meaning in this case is Dhritarashtra, his sense of duty, fairness, rationality, and even basic survival instinct. Oh my God. I'm just going to go back to that file because there was another sentence there. It says, being paralyzed by attachment, he let an intra-family conflict snowball into a world war. Like being paralyzed by attachment, we sometimes let a small thing breed like a cancer, let it grow, become a huge, huge cancerous thing. And maybe breakups happen, maybe we hurt somebody terribly, and it was not why to hide that little wound, you know. What was his wound? It was an attachment wound. Probably he had it as a child. You know, his birth story, his blindness, his insecurities, right? He never worked on it. So he was an old blind king sitting there, and he was extremely toxic. He was extremely weak person. In one word, the disease of Dhritarashtra was codependency. Codependency basically means he was trying to please Duryodhan in order that Duryodhan would love him and please him. You know, he was so dependent on this evil-minded son, his own evil-minded son. He was so attached to receiving something from that person who Duryodhan had his own issues. You know, he had all the demons invested energies into him. And from that person, Dhritarashtra was waiting all life to get like crumbs of affection from this evil son. And this is called codependency. We try to rescue somebody so that they can rescue us. Instead, we should invest that energy to protect ourselves, to take care of ourselves, instead of, you know, stupid way waiting that I will give everything, I will sacrifice, I'll cut myself to save this person so that that person can save me. And we usually invest in the wrong person. We invest in the person who is weak, who's tired, who is a wounded soldier, is wounded so badly that all they can do is hurt you. And instead of investing in our healing, sometimes we give so much power to the wrong people. So like a cancer, what happens is when we get into this, any of these addictions, okay, codependency is an addiction, depending on somebody else to make us feel fulfilled. This is codependency. So it's a disease, it's an addiction. And that addiction eventually will make us lose our sanity. We lose our minds. We start going after expecting things which are unhealthy. We lose a sense of duty towards our body, duty towards our mind, duty towards our health, duty towards our spiritual duties. Fairness. We start giving so much importance to this person. We start neglecting every other important people in our life. We isolate ourselves. We disconnect from God. Instead of becoming dependent on God, we become dependent on this human being who's flawed. And then we lose our rationality and even basic survival instinct. A lot of people with any sort of addiction, food addiction, call it whatever, shopping addiction, some people have social media addiction, addiction to people, relationship addiction, love addiction. You know, people cannot be without some romantic connections. It's an addiction. You know, it's an addiction of the mind to think that I need somebody to have that kind of relation. Otherwise, you know, I'm incomplete. Then what happens is we lose that natural drive that we have to live our life to the full, take care of our health and take care of our habits and hobbies and emotional health. And we sometimes women, they don't work, they become so dependent, they're always waiting for, oh, I wish my husband changes, oh, I wish my father changes or understand me or whatever. You know, they wait all life, and then they lose that sense of right direction in life. What else? I was thinking that, what is that word there? Paralyzed. It paralyzes us. This sort of any unhealthy attachment paralyzes us. And when we are paralyzed, we're not growing. We're stunted. Our growth is stunted. We're not developing into the best version of ourselves. Okay, so those were the points that I wanted to share.
I just have a question on the survival instinct. So what does that mean?
Sometimes people don't want to live anymore. They feel suicidal. They feel like life is not worth living. They lose the sense of love for life. which is not healthy. Every soul wants to live, wants to thrive. So when you're in any unhealthy pattern, any unhealthy relational dynamic, any unhealthy addictive behaviors, it starts to become severe, like say addiction to nicotine. Okay, when people, they want more and more and more, they cannot live without nicotine. They want more and more of it, but they like less and less of it, and they become so addicted to it that at some point they're like, I don't want to wake up because I want to go and smoke nicotine. And then they don't want to live their life. They don't want to go to work. They don't want to go hang out with friends, because what if those friends will give me, whether it's alcohol, whether it's cigarettes, whether it's food. People start running away from life, because any attachment that is unhealthy leads us to losing our desire for living. Some people have addiction to workaholics, and some people have addiction to social media follower numbers and comments, and I have that to some degree. We all have different demons. That's one of my demons. So recently I made that kind of a vow that I won't look at how many people liked, how many people commented, how many people dropped out and unfollowed me. Because these are mundane things. Fame is only in the minds of people. It's not real. In a minute it can change. But if I'm addicted to it, if I'm attached to it, it makes me blind, and I can lose my sense of direction. I can lose my sense of rationality. I can lose my love for life. And then I lose my mind. That's why it's called insanity.
So is anything out of balance an addiction?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, except if you're out of balancely attached to Krishna and you cannot function because you're so attached to thinking of Krishna that you cannot cook, you cannot eat, you cannot dress properly because you're thinking of Krishna, that is a different level of insanity, which is transcendental. But in any mundane imbalance and excessive leaning towards shopping, excessive eating habits, excessive fasting habits, excessive work habits, excessive connections, chatting with a lot of people, cannot live without being in touch with a lot of people. That's people addiction. That's relationship addiction. Always needing somebody, not being able to be alone and study a book, read a book, and get off social media. That people nowadays, they have that disease. A lot of people have that disease. Anything else?
I just wanted to say thank you. I have to go. Thank you so much. Is this every week?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. I'll see you
Yes.
next week then.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Hare Bol. Hare Krishna.
Kushbu, you have anything to say? You've been very quiet. Okay, if we don't have any more questions, I'm going to stop